So our next presentation is going to be given by Alvi Jawad. Alvi is a master's student in the Department of Systems and Computer Engineering at Carleton University. His research interests are related to the use of formal methods and approaches to assess the cybersecurity of critical infrastructures, in particular, industrial control and cyber physical systems and the Internet of Things. His talk today is going to be on analyzing the impact of cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. So Alvi, please unmute your microphone and go ahead whenever you're ready.
Yeah, just making sure that you can see me and you can hear me as well. Okay. So let's get started. So hi everyone, my name is Alvi, and again, as Dr. Diskolka mentioned, I'm a master's student at Carleton University. And without further ado, we'll get started with this topic, and we're going to talk a lot about why analyzing the impact of cyber attacks is important rather than how we're doing it, because we believe that raising this concern is necessary if we want to push the research further. So let's start with the idea of industrial control systems. So as we know, cyber, or rather critical infrastructures, are a very broad topic. And within that, we have this industrial control systems, which are basically a wide variety of control systems and also associated instrumentation that we use for automatically controlling our industrial processes. So some of these industrial processes include, for example, our manufacturing systems, the oil and the gas industry, our power systems, chemical processing systems, telecommunication systems, and a lot more. What's very important to know about this is these systems have this duality of this cyber segment and this physical segment. So in the cyber segment, we have these control systems that are monitoring, that are getting their data from remote sensors, that are monitoring different process variables to make decisions, and then they're sending some cyber commands to the physical segment. And the physical segment is taking those commands and performing some physical processes based on those commands. Now, this has made a lot of our work very efficient, and again, that's a boon. But as soon we'll see, this also leads to a lot of different problems. Now, do we need to even care about this? Well, we researchers care because these systems, again, as I said before, they're a combination of information technology and operational technology systems. So that's really good. But at the same time, that also means that we have to care about both of these aspects of these systems. IT solutions alone, and a lot of the security solutions that were built for IT systems are not effective for these systems. And at the same time, this IT and OT convergence, they inherit the weaknesses of both. So when we're dealing with the system security, we have to, let me just plug in my charger. That's going to be a problem otherwise. Okay, so this also inherits the weaknesses of both. And when we're talking about the security, when we're talking about mitigating threats, when we're talking about the impact on those systems, if a vulnerability were to be exploited, we need to care about both. Do you care? Well, you should care as long as you care about having electricity, as long as you care about having oil and gas. If you care about all the manufactured things that you use, well, which are basically everything these days, if you care about communicating with each other, you probably care as well. So yeah, we all care. Now, we're talking about impact, but what do we exactly mean by impact? Now, when we think about impact, we have to think about what really happens when a cyber attack is successful. If we think about smart grids, right? The impact on smart grids means, well, system is not available. It's not supplying power anymore, so the system is down. So that's the impact on the availability of the systems. But with industrial control systems, we need to worry about both cyber systems and the physical segment of those systems as well. So we need to worry about the cyber physical aspect of the systems. And at the same time, we'll see that some of these cyber attacks can end up causing a lot of physical impacts. And those physical impacts will cascade throughout the entire systems. It will propagate and it will affect other parts of the systems. And simply because we have a lot of interconnecting components that are all interacting amongst each other, sometimes these cascading effects can be devastating. So we started our research by looking at different industrial control systems, so smart grids, manufacturing systems, chemical processing systems, wastewater treatment systems, and a lot of SCADA systems associated with those systems. And we really focused on modeling and simulation techniques. The reason behind that was these industrial control systems have very high availability requirements, meaning that they need to be available for their purposes. We can't just go to an operator and say, hey, we need to perform some attacks on your system for our research. Can we do that? That's just not going to happen. So we need some alternative platform. If we want test beds, they are not really available, or even when they're available, they're costly. And because we're talking about cyber attacks and we want to see the impact of these attacks, there's going to be damage to the system. And reproducing these damaging manipulations are going to be costly. So we need an alternative platform where we can perform attacks and see those impacts. And that's why we're really focused on this modeling and simulation techniques that can be used. And as we went through our research through these domains, the result was very concerning, and for a lot of different reasons. First, we saw that there was a lot of oversaturation. Research of the smart grid and its SCADA system is oversaturated. A lot of the research, a lot of the studies on impact or impact analysis were looking at the smart grid and its availability. Now, this raises the question about what are some of the other industrial control systems? What about them? Don't we care about manufacturing systems? Don't we care about, for example, our chemical processing systems? What about them? And they're only looking at the system availability. But the problem with that is, well, if it was only operational technology that's involved in those systems, looking at the availability would be fine because that was the most important security objective. But because these systems are composed of IT and OT systems, we need to care about the other aspects as well. We need to care about the system confidentiality and the integrity and all the other things. Because a lot of these systems are proprietary. Then we look at these and think, well, if the data gets leaked, if some of our sensitive information gets leaked, do we care? We probably care. Do we care if the system integrity is somehow compromised? Again, we probably care. So we came to this conclusion that we need to look at other industrial control systems that are not the smart grid. We also looked at it and found that there was a lot of domain-specific research going on. So many of the metrics that people use to define impact on the systems are very, very specific to the domain that were considered. So for example, when we're looking at studies on the smart grid, we're looking at the frequency of the interruption, the loss of load expectancy. Some people are looking at the maximum frequency and voltage deviation. Some are looking at the cost of losing each branch. Some people are looking at damage due to cutting off transmission lines. Those are all fine if we're only worried about the smart grid. But as we previously said, we're also worried about the other systems, other industrial control systems. So then the question rises, how do we reuse these metrics for other systems, or are they even reusable to begin with? So we decided that we needed to find some domain agnostic approaches, and we needed to define some domain agnostic metrics. Granularity was a big problem as well. So a lot of the studies defined impact based on whether the system was in a steady state or not. So if the system was in a steady state, that was fine. If it's not, then there was some kind of impact on the system. So let's go and calculate those impacts. Now, what about some of the systems that have millions of interacting components? Whether your entire system is in a steady state or not does not really represent whether all of the components are functional or not. We need to worry about each of those components and what each of them are doing. What about modular systems? What about systems of systems? In systems of systems, we have as component other systems. So in this case, we can't really only care about the SOS or the entire system of systems in general. We need to care about each of these systems and then each of the components of the systems. So again, granularity was a big problem. So as we were dealing with modeling and simulation approaches, we figured out that we needed to model the proper granularity, and we needed a modeling technique that was suitable for that. We also saw that a lot of the analysis approaches were very content when they saw that the system was reaching their mission objectives, but they weren't considering time at all. So if we think about manufacturing systems, and we think, well, the system's mission objective is to produce, let's say, 1,000 materials within 3 hours. So it's fine when the system is producing those materials, so that's okay. But if they're doing it within 3 hours, that's fine. We're quite happy with that. But if they're doing it within 3 days, that's a problem. But a lot of the analysis approaches would be happy even if they were to be done within 3 days, because they were only considering whether the system mission objectives were being achieved or not. So we need to really look at these delays. Where are those delays that are delaying our operation? We need to care about whether the system is finishing their mission objectives in a timely manner. And if we have those delays, how do we measure those delays? How do we stop those delays? So timing of the operation is something that's often not considered. So we decided that we needed a time viewpoint. And we also found that there's a lot of diverse modeling techniques that are being used to measure impact in those systems. So again, graphs, we found that graphs are the most used modeling technique. We had a lot of variants of graphs. We have reliability graphs, dependency graphs, reachability graphs. We saw that a lot of other methods are also being used. For example, finite state automata, sometimes also known as finite state machines. We have Petri nets, Bayesian networks. We had tag trees, influence diagrams, geometrical modeling, and a lot of different techniques. So final question was, which modeling technique was the most suitable for us? So after going through this, some things were very clear. We needed to develop an analysis approach. So first, which was applicable to systems in general. So even if we applied it to one system, we could reuse it to define and identify impact on other systems. And we needed to define metrics that are domain agnostic, so they can be used for every single system in general. We also needed to select a modeling technique that allows the convenient modeling of the system dynamics. So we needed a modeling technique that could model the discrete behavior of the cyber portion of industrial control systems, and that could also model the continuous time behavior of the physical portion of the industrial control systems. Again, we need a modeling technique that could model the time behavior of system processes. And we also need a modeling technique that could model systems with varying granularity. So we ended up choosing timed automata. So this is a formal modeling technique, sometimes also known as finite state machines that are extended with clock variables. Another name would be finite state automata. For those who are mathematically inclined, there's some mathematical information involved, but we're not going to go into too much details of that. But the reason why we chose this timed automata modeling technique is because, well, it provides everything that we needed for our analysis approach. It allowed us to model the time behavior of industrial control systems. We could have a hybrid view of the system. We could model the message passing and the shared variable communication. That's very important in industrial control systems. We could detect the state of the system, the overall system, and the state of every single component at any time. And because this is a formal modeling technique, we could go for model checking, a lot of formal verification techniques that are automated, and that provides us with exhaustive results, which can be done within a matter of, let's say, even seconds or minutes. So our approach is divided into 2 different phases. So the first phase is the modeling phase, where in step 1, we start with the system modeling. And for this phase, we need the design specification documents and the requirement analysis phase documents. So these are again documents that can be found at the very early stages of system development. So from the design specifications document, we develop a system model. And then again, this is also developed using timed automata. And then for that model, we specify the system invariants, the system properties that must be satisfied if the system were to operate safely and securely. And then we verify the system model to ensure that the system is working with regards to those system invariants. And next, we move towards the attacker modeling. We develop an attacker model that can perform different attacks on the system. And we select and specify certain attacks as the attacker can perform. For this, we need information from the threat model of the system. If we have that available for the system, that's fine. If we don't, we can create it at this point. That's all good. And then we move towards the analysis phase. So in this phase, we execute attacks on our system, and we detect those attacks based on violations of our system invariants. And finally, after we have detected these attacks, we have detected that there's some sort of impact that's going on in the system. We analyze the impact of those attacks using statistical model checking. So here we have a simple example of a manufacturing cell control system. So you can think of it as part of an assembly line of a very big manufacturing system that sort of does only one thing. So it can be focused on doing, for example, only drilling, only molding, only shaping the material. So it can only do one thing. And we have 4 internal agents. We have the control agent, we have the storage agent, the handling agent, and the processing agent. The control agent is the control system of this manufacturing cell that controls all the other internal agents. And it's also something that communicates with the external systems. So the external system might be sending information to the control agent saying, hey, go and produce 1,000 materials. And the control agent, after receiving that, can then go and tell the other internal agents to process and produce that material depending on what the manufacturing cell is supposed to do. So just to give you a bit more information, the storage agent kind of acts like inventory where the materials can be loaded or unloaded. The handling agent, when the materials are unloaded, can take them to the processing agent. So the processing agent can finally do the processing. Again, the processing, depending on the manufacturing cell, can be only one action. It can be only the drilling, molding, welding, whatever that is. Or it can be a chain of actions, again, depending on what we want. Now, our first task is to model these manufacturing system using timed automata. So without going too much into the modeling details, what you see here is the timed automata model of the processing agent. So we do this for every single agent in the system. And we're using the modeling tool called OOPL to do that. So OOPL, again, is the toolbox that can verify real-time systems that are modeled as networks of timed automata. So once we have this individual models of these agents, what you can do is you can execute all of them together to create a network of timed automata. And that's really the goal at this modeling phase. Then the idea is to go and identify the system invariants that the system needs to satisfy for proper operation, which is not shown here, but we use a query language called TCTL, also known as timed computation tree logic for that. Next, we have our attacker modeling. Again, this is modeled using timed automata. In OOPL, the attacker, without going too much into the details, has random behavior. So it can avoid detection while it is performing its attacks. And the attacker is able to perform tampering and spoofing attacks on the manufacturing cell system. Now, here, I'm just going to get the laser pointer to make this easier to see. So here we have the regular operation of the manufacturing cell control systems, and it's shown using these Gantt charts. As we can see, this is the loading and the unloading operation of the storage agent, which takes some amount of time, 2 time units to be exact. And these time units, again, you can convert them to You can think of them as minutes, seconds, or hours, depending on what kind of granularity you want while you're modeling your system. So these loading and unloading of the storage agent, moving by the handling agent, and the final processing by the processing agent creates one cycle. And this one cycle of this 10 time units means that we have successfully produced or processed 1 unit of material. So this is a regular operation, meaning that each 10 time unit, we should have 1 unit of material being processed. Now, what happens in the corrupted operation is we have this attacker that's shown in violet here, and the attacker, when it's successful, the attacker can corrupt the data, corrupt one of the process variables that the agents need in order to operate. Now, the attacker's attack can be successful, but sometimes even when there are no defensive mechanisms implemented here, no recovery mechanisms implemented, the system during its normal operations can reset those variables. So we don't see the corrupted data anymore because the data, again, has been reset by the system itself. But if the attacker is successful again at certain points of time, right? Because at this point, before the handling agent moves the material, it needs to know whether the material is even there or not. So in that case, the handling agent tries to check the process variable that has been corrupted by the attacker. In that case, the system is waiting because it can't read the corrupted value. It's waiting for the right value to appear, and because there's no recovery mechanism in the system, because we're thinking about a defenseless system, it's going to be in this state forever, meaning that we now have an infinite delay on the system unless there's some sort of recovery operation going on. We can also have different spoofing attacks on the system. So in this case, the attacker is mimicking one of the agents in the system, and they're sending these loaded commands whenever their attacks are successful. So as you can see, at some point in the system, this loaded command, you can't see the details here, but you can see it in the modeling tool that we've been using, that when the loaded command is sent at a certain time, what happens is the system performs one of its processes before it should have performed it, meaning that after, in this case, the storage agent performs the loading, it has no idea about what to do because the entire system at this point is messed up and the system has reached a deadlock. It doesn't know what to do. This is different from an infinite delay because this is even harsher in the sense that the system doesn't have any way of recovering from this point onwards. Another interesting effect that we found out when we looked at spoofing attacks is certain attacks, or rather certain commands, can make actions overlap among each other. So we have the storage agent that's unloading the material, and after the unloading is finished, as you can see here, the handling agent is supposed to move the material again after it has been unloaded. But what's happening here is before the material is even unloaded, the handling agent starts moving the material because we have a successful unloaded command here. The handling agent believes that it can now move the material, but the material doesn't even exist here. So even though, as you can see, this cycle here ends faster than the others, this is not really a material being processed because the handling agent doesn't really move anything. It just tried to move something. So this shows that within this 30 minutes, we now have more than 3 materials being produced, which is somehow faster than normal. But again, we have to keep in mind that some of these cycles are not processing or produce anything at all. So again, some of our preliminary results are shown here. So as you can see, within 500 time units in the normal case, we should have 50 materials being produced. But without data corruption and data modification attacks, which are all tampering attacks, we will have an infinite delay on the system as soon as the system is being compromised, so we can't even produce 3 materials. So we have a production delay of over 95% in all cases. Message spoofing attacks, again, result in similar impact, but they don't produce delays, but rather lead the system to a deadlock. A different type of spoofing attack, again, as you can see, in normal cases, the materials produced should be 50, but somehow we're performing an attack and producing more materials than usual. So that's interesting to begin with, but we have to bear in mind that some of those system cycles are not producing any material at all. So this represents a different type of impact. So what's next? What do we want to do next? So the idea is to use this analysis approach to construct an assembly line that has multiple of these manufacturing cells, and then create a really comprehensive manufacturing system that consists of multiple assembly lines and that has multiple manufacturing cells in each of them. And the idea from then going forward is to look at other industrial control systems. Again, nothing, not anything that's related to smart grids. So we're looking to, we're thinking of taking a look at chemical processing systems and chemical reactors for that matter. Now going forward, our idea is to really identify and measure the impact of different cyber attacks, so we can prioritize mitigating the most impactful attacks against industrial control systems. The other idea is to develop analysis approaches that are, again, widely applicable. We need to have domain agnostic metrics so we can use them to systems in general. And really, the goal of all of this is to direct the development of secure future industrial control systems so we can better understand where we really want to use the available resources that we have that are very, very limited. So again, that's our objective moving forward. So these are some references if you want to know more about Time Automata or Opal or what we've been doing. And with that, I thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to field them.
Thank you, Alvi. So there was a question that came in, and I'm just going to read it out here, and then you can go ahead and answer it. So is it possible to design attacks that impact reliability but do not affect time? So perhaps by frequently reducing and then increasing a motor speed by the same amount above and below normal, for example.
Well, you're thinking that it's not related to time, but at the same time, it might be related to time. So increasing and then decreasing. So, well, that's fine in its all, but whenever you're thinking about those actions, they themselves took some amount of time. And then you're going to perform that attack, you have to prepare for that attack, and then you are going to perform that attack. So that also involves time. You as an attacker are not a binary entity saying that I'm attacking or I'm not attacking. You need some time to prepare, you need to attack, and then you attack. The system, the impact on the system needs some amount of time to be produced. And sometimes the impact that you have on your system right now can also cascade toward the system to other parts of the system, and that takes some amount of time as well. So even if you want to care, even if you not want to care about time, we have to care about time because time is involved in every single thing in industrial control systems. So yeah, you need time, you need to model time.